Okay, so imagine this. You wake up tomorrow morning, grab your phone and try to check your brokerage account. Maybe you've got some retirement savings in there, maybe some stocks you've been holding, nothing crazy. But when you try to log in, the app just says temporarily unavailable. You switch to your bank, same thing. You call customer service, and after 45 minutes on hold, someone finally tells you, we're experiencing technical difficulties due to a clearing failure. Your funds are safe, but we cannot process withdrawals at this time. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds like some doomsday scenario, right? Like this would never actually happen, except it almost did. In 2021, during the GameStop short squeeze, we came within hours of exactly this H happening. And most people still have no idea how close we actually were. Today, I want to spend way too much time thinking about something that almost nobody talks about. The invisible infrastructure that processes every single trade you make. If you're someone who has money in the stock market, who has a retirement account, who uses literally any financial service, and you've never heard of clearinghouses or CCPs, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because what I'm about to show you is going to fundamentally change how you think about where your money actually is. Here's the thing. When you buy a stock on your phone, let's say you buy $1,000 worth of Apple, you think the transaction goes like this. You click buy, your money goes directly to whoever sold you the stock, and boom, you own Apple shares. Simple, right? Wrong. What actually happens is so much more complicated, and frankly kind of terrifying when you understand it. Look, between the moment you click buy and the moment you actually own that stock, your trade passes through something called a central counterparty clearinghouse, or CCP for short. And here's what most people don't realize. This clearinghouse doesn't just process your trade, it actually becomes the buyer to every seller, and the seller to every buyer. Let me say that again because it's wild. When you buy that Apple stock, you don't buy it from another person. You buy it from the clearinghouse, and the person who sold it, they didn't sell it to you. They sold it to the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse sits in the middle of every single trade. In the US, there's one main clearinghouse for stocks called the DTCC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. And this one organization processes about $2.15 trillion worth of securities every single day. Every single day. Now you might be thinking, okay, but why? Why do we need this middleman? And that's actually a great question because the answer reveals just how fragile the whole system used to be. Let's go back to 1987, October 19th, Black Monday. The stock market crashed 22.6% in a single day. It's still the largest single-day percentage decline in US stock market history. But here's what's really interesting. The crash itself wasn't actually the scariest part. What almost destroyed the entire financial system was what happened the next morning. See, back then, trades took several days to settle. So when the market crashed on Monday, by Tuesday morning, there were billions of dollars worth of trades that people had agreed to, but now couldn't afford to complete. Let's say you agreed to buy a stock for $100 on Monday morning, but by Monday afternoon, that stock was worth $60. You still owed $100. But what if you didn't have the money anymore? What if you just didn't pay? This happened thousands of times. And every time someone defaulted on a trade, it created a chain reaction. Because the person who was supposed to receive that $100 from you was counting on it to pay for their trades. It was like dominoes. The system almost collapsed. And this is where clearinghouses come in. After 1987, regulators basically said, never again. They created these central clearinghouses to become the guaranteed counterparty to every trade. If you default, the clearinghouse still pays. If the other person defaults, the clearinghouse still delivers your stock. On paper, this sounds great, right? It eliminates counterparty risk. It makes the system safer. But here's where it gets really interesting. By eliminating counterparty risk in individual trades, we've created something way more dangerous. We've created systemic risk. Look, here's the math on this, and it's genuinely insane. In the US, about 98% of all stock trades go through the DTCC, one organization. For derivatives, things like options, futures, swaps, about 75% go through just 3 clearinghouses globally, LCH in London, CME in Chicago, and ICE in the US. So we've taken the risk that used to be spread across millions of individual trades and concentrated it into just a handful of organizations. The Bank for International Settlements, basically the central bank for central banks, published a report in 2024 that looked at what would happen if just one of these major clearinghouses failed. Their conclusion? It would trigger widespread financial instability and could freeze a significant portion of global financial transactions within 24 to 48 hours. Let me put that in perspective. In 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, it had about $600 billion in assets. That nearly destroyed the global economy. The DTCC alone handles $2.15 trillion per day. In a single day, they process more than 3 times what Lehman Brothers held in total. Now, the clearinghouses will tell you this could never happen because they have all these safety measures in place, and they do. They require something called margin, basically, collateral that members have to post to cover potential losses. But here's what most people don't realize. That margin system is exactly what almost froze the entire market during the GameStop saga. Okay, so January 2021. GameStop stock is going absolutely crazy. It goes from $20 to $483 in a matter of weeks. And here's what was happening behind the scenes. Every time someone bought GameStop on Robinhood or any other broker, that trade had to go through the DTCC. And because the stock was so volatile, swinging 50%, 100% in a single day, the DTCC looked at this and said, this is risky. We need more margin. On the morning of January 28th, 2021, the DTCC told Robinhood, you need to deposit $3 billion by the end of the day. $3 billion. Robinhood didn't have $3 billion just sitting around. So what did they do? They stopped allowing people to buy GameStop. And immediately, people thought it was some conspiracy, market manipulation, protecting hedge funds, whatever. But the reality was simpler and somehow more terrifying. Robinhood literally could not afford to let you buy the stock because they didn't have the collateral the clearinghouse required. Now you might be thinking, okay, but they figured it out, right? The system worked. Did it though? Because here's what actually happened. Robinhood scrambled, raised emergency funding, and eventually deposited the money. But according to testimony later, if they hadn't been able to come up with that money within a few hours, the DTCC would have started closing out their positions. All of them. Every Robinhood user's trades would have been forcibly liquidated. And if Robinhood had gone under, which they nearly did, other brokers would have faced the same margin calls. It could have created a cascade. The former chairman of the SEC, Jay Clayton, said in an interview later that we were closer than most people realize to an actual market freeze. This is where it gets really interesting. The clearinghouse didn't fail. The system worked in the sense that it prevented a default, but it worked by essentially holding the entire market hostage. Pay us $3 billion or we shut you down. Here's something that's going to sound crazy, but I need you to really understand this. When you have money in a brokerage account, you don't actually own the stocks in your account. Like, legally, you don't. Your stocks are held in something called street name by the DTCC through a system called SEDA & Co. Is the actual registered owner of almost every publicly traded stock in America. You just have a beneficial interest in them. What does this mean in practice? It means if there's ever a problem at the clearinghouse level, a technical failure, a liquidity crisis, a cyber attack, whatever, you can't just take your ball and go home. Your stocks are in the system, and if the system freezes, your stocks freeze with it. In 2012, when MF Global collapsed, this was a major brokerage firm, it took years for some customers to get their money back, and this was just one broker failing, not a clearinghouse. The Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, some clients didn't get their assets back until 2016, 8 years. Now, look, I'm not saying you should panic and pull all your money out of the market. That would be crazy, and honestly, you probably couldn't even if you wanted to because of how the system works. But what I am saying is that you need to understand the actual structure of where your money is. Okay, so stocks are one thing, but let me tell you about derivatives, because this is where things get truly wild. The total notional value of the global derivatives market is somewhere around $600 to $700 trillion. With a T, that's about 7 times the entire global economy. Now, notional value is different from actual money at risk, but still, when you have contracts worth $700 trillion all flowing through just a few clearinghouses, you've created what some economists call too big to fail on steroids. Here's a concrete example. In 2018, there was a flash crash in the Swedish stock market. Totally unexpected. Nasdaq OMX, the clearinghouse that handles Nordic derivatives, demanded emergency margin calls from its members. Some firms had to come up with hundreds of millions of dollars in less than an hour. One firm, a market maker called Knight Capital, couldn't do it. They went bankrupt. Just gone. And this was from a relatively small market crash in Sweden. Now imagine a scenario where a major shock hits multiple markets simultaneously. Maybe a geopolitical crisis, maybe a cyber attack, maybe just a technical glitch at the wrong time. And suddenly, clearinghouses across the world are all demanding margin at once. The Bank of England did a stress test on this in 2023. Their finding? In their worst-case scenario, the amount of margin that would need to be posted globally would exceed $1 trillion, and it would need to be posted immediately, like within hours. Where does that money come from? Here's what most people don't realize. It comes from you. Banks would have to restrict lending. Pension funds would have to sell assets. Brokerages would have to limit withdrawals. Because everyone in the system would be scrambling to meet these margin calls at the same time. Now you might be thinking, surely regulators are all over this, right? They learned from 2008? Yes and no. After 2008, regulations like Dodd-Frank in the US and EMIR in Europe forced a lot of derivatives trading to go through clearinghouses. The thinking was, clearinghouses are safer than bilateral trades between banks. But here's the problem. By forcing more trades through clearinghouses, we've made them even more systemically important. We've concentrated even more risk. And the crazy part? Clearinghouses aren't regulated the same way banks are. They don't have to hold as much capital. They don't have the same liquidity requirements. Because the assumption is that they can always call for more margin from their members. But what if there's no more margin to call? There was a fascinating research paper from the IMF in 2024 that modeled this exact scenario. They found that in a severe market stress, clearinghouses could require more margin than their members could possibly provide, even if those members liquidated every available asset. The result? The clearinghouse itself becomes insolvent. And if a major clearinghouse fails, there is no backstop. The Federal Reserve can't just print $2 trillion overnight to bail it out. Well, technically they could, but the economic consequences would be, let's just say, bad. Look, here's the thing. I'm not trying to scare you out of investing. The stock market is still one of the best wealth-building tools available, but you need to understand the actual risks you're taking. So let me give you some practical takeaways. First, diversify where your assets are held. Don't have everything at one brokerage. If you have substantial savings, consider spreading them across 2 or 3 different firms. Yes, they all use the same clearinghouse ultimately, but at least you're protected if one individual broker fails. Second, keep an emergency fund in actual cash at a bank. Not a money market fund, not a brokerage sweep account, an FDIC-insured bank account. Because if there's ever a clearinghouse crisis, you want money you can access immediately that isn't tied up in the settlement system. 3 to 6 months of expenses is the standard recommendation, but honestly, in light of this, I'd lean towards 6 months at minimum. Third, understand the settlement timeline. When you sell a stock, it takes 2 business days to settle. T+2, they call it. During those 2 days, your money is in the clearinghouse system. If something goes wrong during that window, your money could be frozen. So if you're planning to sell investments to fund something time-sensitive, like a down payment on a house, build in extra buffer time. Fourth, and this is important, pay attention to broker stability. After the Robinhood or GameStop situation, I actually think it's worth considering larger, more established brokerages for your serious money. Yes, Robinhood has cool features, but do they have $3 billion to post in margin if the clearinghouse comes calling? Maybe now they do, but it's worth thinking about. Companies like Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, they have hundreds of billions in capital. They're not going to face a liquidity crisis from a margin call. Fifth, consider some assets outside the traditional clearinghouse system. This is controversial, but I think it's worth considering. Physical gold, maybe some Bitcoin, though crypto has its own clearinghouse risks now, real estate, even Series Luana bonds directly from the Treasury. These are assets you can actually hold outside the banking system. I'm not saying go full prepper and bury gold in your backyard, but 5-10% of your portfolio in assets that aren't in the clearinghouse system? That's not crazy. That's just prudent diversification. Here's what really keeps me up at night about this. We've built a global financial system where efficiency and interconnectedness have been prioritized over resilience. And look, I get it. Clearinghouses make the market more efficient. They reduce costs. They prevent individual defaults from spreading. On a day-to-day basis, they work great. But we've created a system with no redundancy. There's no backup clearinghouse. There's no plan B. It's like building a city with only one power plant. Sure, it works great until it doesn't. The crazy part is that the people running these clearinghouses know this. There's a whole field of research on CCP recovery and resolution. Basically, what happens when a clearinghouse fails? And the answers are not great. The options are basically bail in the surviving members, force other banks and brokers to cover the losses, tear up some contracts, just cancel trades that can't settle, government bailout. None of these are good. Option 1 could cause more failures. Option 2 destroys trust in the market. Option 3 is politically toxic. It might not even be legally possible. There's actually been serious discussion in regulatory circles about creating a resolution authority for clearinghouses, basically a pre-planned bankruptcy process. But as of early 2025, nothing comprehensive exists. So we're running a 700 trillion derivatives market through a system that doesn't have a failure plan. Think about that for a second. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is depressing. Is there any good news? Actually, yes, there are people working on this. Some regulators are pushing for clearinghouses to hold more capital, like a lot more. The skin in the game proposals would require clearinghouses to have enough capital to survive the default of their 2 largest members. That would be huge. There's also discussion about creating stress testing regimes for clearinghouses, similar to what banks go through. It's where regulators run scenarios and say, okay, what if there's a 30% market crash? What if two major banks fail simultaneously? Show us you can survive that. And there's interesting work on blockchain-based settlement systems that could, theoretically, reduce settlement time from 2 days to minutes. If trades settle instantly, there's way less risk building up in the clearinghouse. But here's the thing. All of this is slow. Regulatory change takes years. Technology implementation takes years. And in the meantime, we're all participating in a system that has this massive structural vulnerability. Look, I know this video was kind of intense. We went deep into some really technical stuff. But I think it's incredibly important that people understand how the financial system actually works, not how we imagine it works. Because here's what most people don't realize. The biggest risks in finance aren't usually the obvious ones. It's not the stock market crash you see coming. It's the infrastructure failure you didn't know existed. The plumbing breaks before the building falls. So what should you do with this information? Take the practical steps I mentioned. Diversify your brokerages. Keep cash on hand. Understand settlement timelines. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket. Or in this case, don't keep all your eggs in baskets that go through the same invisible warehouse. But more broadly, be aware. Pay attention to clearinghouse news. I know it sounds boring, but this stuff matters. When you hear about margin calls or settlement failures, understand that these aren't just technical glitches. They're warning signs. The system we have works 99% of the time. But that 1%, that's when you really want to have thought about this stuff beforehand. So hit that subscribe button if this changed how you think about where your money is. Give it a thumbs up if you found this valuable. And drop a comment. I want to know, did you know any of this before watching? Are you going to change anything about how you manage your investments? Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't to scare you out of investing. The goal is to make you a more informed investor, to help you understand the actual risks you're taking so you can manage them appropriately. And now you know about the $2 trillion invisible infrastructure that processes every trade you make. You know it exists, you know how it can fail, and you know what to do about it. That's power. I'll see you in the next one.